Great. So again, welcome to our Turing-Roche Knowledge Share series. The aim of these monthly events are to bring together members of the Turing, Roche, and the wider scientific community to hear partnership updates, different perspectives on data science topics, and build new connections. Just to get us started, I'm going to share a couple of slides. Great. Hopefully you can all see that. So a bit of background to the partnership. The clue is in the name. It's a partnership between the Alan Turing Institute and Roche. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with at least one of these organizations. But in case not, the Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for Data Science and AI. We are a network of university, industry, charity, and government partners. And the Turing-Roche partnership sits under the Health and Medical Sciences program at the Turing. And Roche is a leading global healthcare company. They have a long-term interest in personalized healthcare, and they also have a growing number of academic partnerships as well. So we launched our strategic 5-year partnership together in June 2021. And this is our partnership North Star, which is our guiding aim for the 5 years. So ultimately, we're collaborating to explore this term patient and disease heterogeneity for advanced analytics. So more simply put, why patients respond differently to treatment and why diseases manifest in different ways in different people. Obviously, this is quite broad, so we're tackling this for a stepwise iterative manner, which you can see illustrated on the right-hand side, with a main focus on developing methodology. We're about halfway through our 5-year partnership, and we have focused our research into 3 different themes staggered across the 5 years. So our first theme is structured missingness. We funded 2 18-month projects in this area, and our speaker today is from the network science project in bold at the bottom. Our other themes are predictive modeling, where we funded 1 18-month project and hired 2 postdocs to work on projects within this theme. And our final theme is multimodal analysis. This theme has just kicked off, and our newly hired postdoc is investigating the TCGA dataset for a potential project alongside some data wranglers from Turing. Our core partnership team is pictured here with representatives from Turing and Roche, and then this is expanded out with researchers we've funded, Turing enrichment students we've taken on, and our cohort of community scholars. Again, you can kind of find out more about who is involved in our partnership network on our Turing-Roche webpage. And also a key part of the partnership is wider connections and collaborations we want to build. So it's really critical for us to be running events like this to get you all involved. I know some of you may have attended our events before, and our usual format is having a Turing speaker and a Roche speaker speaking on a different data science topic each. We will be continuing this format for some of our future events, but we're also really excited that as the partnership research is progressing, we'll be shining a light on some of that at these events as well. So in that vein, as I mentioned, today's session will give an update on one of the funded projects in the structured missingness theme. So I'm delighted to welcome our speaker today, Anthony Baptista, who is a research associate for the partnership and also at Queen Mary, the University of London. Anthony will be discussing his work on proposing a novel information-theoretic approach to quantifying triadic interactions in missing data. As mentioned, we'll be hearing from Anthony, and then we should have plenty of time for questions at the end. Feel free to pop these in the Q&A box as we go. And with that, I will hand over to you, Anthony.
Thank you, Vicky, for the good introduction. So today I will present to you a part of my research during my postdoc. So I arrived in the project last year, or 40 months ago. And just before to go in details about triadic interaction, structured missingness, gene expression, and so on, I will give you a little bit a hint of my background. So I start my research journey with statistical physics, especially statistical physics of liquids. So during my master degree, I study some kind of models to determine some kind of complex disorder. So it's something like that. So if I show this snapshot, it could be maybe a little bit difficult to catch up why this kind of things is interesting. I will explain very easily. So if you mix some alcohol and water, you can expect to have something like that, named simple disorder, because it's just some thermodynamic disorder, like when you have some temperature that's increasing, the particle move, and you have something that is really random. But in a realistic mixture, when you mix some alcohol and some water, you don't see this, but you see something like that. So you can see some patterning happen. And I developed with my colleague in Paris some theoretical model and some molecular dynamics to better understanding why these patterns happened. So I don't give you more details about that, but if you're interested, there are two publications on this topic, one theoretical and one that is more numerical, and you have some experimental evidence with some colleagues that make the experiments in Budapest. So after my master's degree, I moved to do a PhD, and I study network theory for biological networks, especially systems biology. So during my PhD, I study random walks, especially random walks on multi-layer networks. And I also study and I have a big interest in network computing, and you published with some of my colleagues and my supervisor here in London, Ginesto Bianconi and Ruben Sanchez Garcia. I think I saw Ruben in the participant. So if you have some question about network computing, you can discuss that too at the end of the talk. Yeah, so again, if you're interested in that, feel free to send me a message on Slack and Turing-Roche Slack or by mail. So today I will talk to you about the project that involves Roche and Turing. And this project is to study structure missingness, not with the point of view of Bayesian inference, but with the point of view of network science. So the idea is you have some big data set with a lot of missing information. We want to develop some network representation, for example, by graph filtration. And after, based on that, you can study the geometry of this network, and so the geometry of the structure missingness. So there are different kind of representation. Network representation, you can use hypergraph or special complexes to study the higher order behavior patterns, or you can use some classical graph or multi-layers, or you can use something pretty new that names triadic interaction. And today I will talk about that. And at the end of the talk, I will bridge and make the link between triadic interaction and structure messiness. So during the talk, I will forget a little bit about structure messiness to go back at the end, and you will see that everything will be very consistent. So the first question is, why study triadic interaction? Because I think most of you don't know about triadic interaction, and it seems pretty awkward and abstract things. But a triadic interaction happens when you have a node that will regulate an edge. And this kind of phenomenon can happen in a lot of different systems, both continuous systems or discrete one. For instance, in gene regulatory network, you can have a modulator. Here it's an AIM that will modulate the behavior between a transcription factor and a target gene. So you can also see in some neurological network with when you have two neurons that will with a behavior, and the behavior will be mediated by some glial cells. You can also see that happen with within the ecological network. One species will modulate the predation between one species and one other species, and of course you can see it happens in structure messiness. And in this case, it's not continuous. You have some discrete variables because this matrix, it's an indicator matrix, so it's equal to 1 if the information is missing and 0 if the information is not missing. So to go back to the network approach, so when you have some triadic interaction, you can define an heterogeneous network. One network would be the structural network. That would be the classical one. For instance, if you have a genetic network, it would be the protein-protein interaction network. And you will create a bipartite network that connect the factor nodes to the structural nodes. And the factor nodes will be associated with the edges of the structural network. So basically, you just have to understand you have a node that will regulate an edge. So it's an higher order structure too. And so I will give you more details about that. So again, so if you have in mind some information theory approach, you have a node Z or feature Z that will modulate the behavior between a feature X and a feature Y. And the question of the project is how to define, how to extract, how to infer, to mind these Triadic interaction, because you have a very big networks, and you want to determine some Triadic, and this Triadic interaction can happen at short range. For example, when you have this node can regulate the short range edges, or it can be happen also at long range. And to determine this Triadic interaction, we'll use some time series. So I represent time series by this function. So you have an evolution across the time, and based on this function, and based on some information theory measure, we will define some relevant or non-relevant Triadic interaction. Yeah. So now I will give you more details about the measure himself. So maybe I will go pretty quickly on this measure, but if you have some question about the measure, why this measure, and so on, we can discuss at the end in the Q&A. Feel free to ask anything. So we can define the conditional mutual information. So it's very well known, so I don't really detail that. And based on this conditional mutual information, you can derive the standard deviation of this conditional mutual information. So the idea is you will have some kind of vector, and for every state of the node Z, we will determine the deviation to the mean of the conditional mutual information. So this measure can be one possible measure to determine the fluctuation of a node will modulate the fluctuation of the age. You can imagine something like that. That's why you study some standard deviation, to study the fluctuation and how the fluctuation of one node will modulate the fluctuation of the age, and the patterns, if patterns happen between the both nodes that compose the age. We can also define two different measures, and one it's an absolute max between the conditional mutual information and the mean of the conditional mutual information. So it would be something more global, to have an absolute difference between the extreme value to the mean. And you can define something more local between two successive steps of the state of your node Z. So all these measures can be defined to determine the strength of the Triadic interaction, but you can also define the sign. For example, if the node fluctuate a lot, we can wonder if the head will fluctuate too, or we can reduce the fluctuation, or you can have this reverse process. So you will determine in which way the increasing of the fluctuation of your node will modulate the fluctuation of the head. So with GeniusPy, you developed a toy model to test that. So again, if you have some question about the toy model, you can discuss that in detail at the end of the talk. So the idea is to develop a Poisson network, and we will develop an activation factor, and this activation factor will give the Triadic interaction. So based on that, so here you have 10 nodes, and you have some nodes will regulate some ages. For instance, node 8 will regulate positively. That will correlate positively with the fluctuation between the node 3 and 6. Same for it also will regulate node 9 and 10. 5 will regulate node 4 and 9, and can have something negative regulation between the node 3 and between the age 1 and 4, and node 4 will negatively regulate the age between the node 5 and 7. So knowing that, so you have your model, you have your expert to detect some Triadic interaction, and also some a sign based on the correlation between the fluctuation of the mutual information, the conditional mutual information, and the range of your node Z. So this figure represents the ranks of all the nodes compared to the age. So in this representation, you have the theta. It's the theta is a measure to determine the accuracy of the prediction. And you see you have a very big difference, a big gap between the node that will regulate, for instance, this node, the node 4, that will regulate the age 5 and 7, and the other nodes. So you have all the nodes. So you compute the measure, for instance, the measure sigma, t, or tn for every node to the age, and it will rank according to the score. And you see something very abrupt. So when you have only one node that regulates the age, for instance, it will be highly predict, and the other nodes will be more noisy. The signal will be more noisy. So knowing that, you have a model, and the measure in the very simple case, you can detect triadic detection based on this measure. Of course, when you work in realistic with some realistic data set, it could be we will see it will be something more complex and less straightforward. So you don't have this abrupt behavior, you have something smoother. We just check the question. Okay. Okay, so, sorry, just because if someone doesn't understand it, I prefer to reply to the question during the talk. So yeah, so this is for the toy model. So the idea of the toy model is just to determine if the measure that you developed makes sense and can detect something in an ideal case. And the answer is yes. So knowing that, you will move to study something more realistic. And in this case, we will use a gene expression. So you use gene expression for acute myeloid leukemia. So our structural network will be a PPI, protein-protein interaction network, and our time series will not really be a time series, but will be a series, and the series will represent the expression level of a gene across different patients. So it will be more a state series, if you can say something like that. And based on the protein-protein interaction network, you can determine some triplets that can be short range, so a click or a wait, and some other can be long range. For example, you have this node that will regulate this age. So by long range, again, I think you're familiar with that. The PPI, the diameter of PPI is pretty small. So when you mean long range, it can be the shortest path. The length of the shortest path between the node and the edge will be something equal to 3, 4, maybe 5. So it's not really far, but it's still long range because if you have the complete PPI, the diameter is around 6 or 7. So knowing the topology of the PPI, if the length of the shortest path between the node and the edge is 5, it's pretty far. So yeah, so knowing that, so again, you have some kind of very similar representation that I showed you just before with the toy model, but in this one, you have the probability density function, and here you have the theta. So the theta, again, it's a way is known to be the zeta score, and it's just a way to measure the accuracy of the prediction compared to a null model. So the null model in this case, it's for example, if you have your gene expression for the gene X, the gene Y, and the condition node Z, and to have the null model, you're just reshuffling the expression of the node Z for the same gene expression of the node X and Y. So this is the null model, and you use the function, the measure sigma, t, and tn, and you compare the prediction with the prediction on this null model that is based on the same data, but just by a reshuffling. So the first observation that you can have is all the different measures that you define are pretty correlated. So here you can see the sigma measure and the t measure will be very similar. And it's something that we can expect because both are pretty global measure. But something that is not so unexpected too is the sigma measure and the t measure are less correlated, still correlated, but less to the tn measure that is more local. So I will see these measures, the sigma and t are really similar to each other, but the tn can provide some complementary information when you want to consider triadic interaction. And so yeah, so you can observe also a second element that is pretty interesting. It's the accuracy, the relevance of the triadic interaction score, depending on the range of the interaction. For example, if you consider long range one, you can see the accuracy stop around 5%, and so it isn't. the value of the theta is more relative, is to compare relatively to the other values. It's not an absolute value, so it really depends on your data set. So it's why let's just say 5, and you compare this value to the value when you obtain with a short range run. So if you have a short range triadic interaction and your sigma measure can compute a theta score based on this accuracy, and you see can go really, really far. So that means the triadic interaction at short range are stronger than the triadic interaction at long range. So again, it's something that is very expected, but we really found this nice behavior. And on the lower part, we display some point clouds of the conditional mutual information. So, and the mutual information, because you can expect, for example, when you are short range, you can expect that the mutual information between the Z node and the X and Y will be pretty high. But in the case of the longer range, the mutual information and the mutual information can be lower, and the conditional information can be higher, and it's what you expect, and it's what you obtain. For example, the I score for the triadic information is obtained when you have conditional information that is pretty high compared to the mutual information between X and Y. And in the case of the short range run, because the signal is very dense, the conditional mutual information and the mutual information need to be both high to have a strong triadic interaction. So this visualization is more or less similar to the previous one, because I display again the mutual information between X and Y, and the conditional mutual information between X and Y conditioned by the node Z. So here I only display the sigma measure. So the sigma measure are displayed according to the color map. The redder is dot, the stronger is triadic interaction. So you can see with this visualization a different subspace. One subspace that is very, very low sigma value, and these dots that correspond to triplets, X and Y and Z, corresponding to non-triadic interaction. For example, if you display the expression of the nodes X and Y conditioned by the value of Z, you can see some behavior, pretty random. And if you change the conditioning of the node Z, you can see more or less the same behavior that is really noisy, really random. So this part of the space are associated with non-triadic interaction, something more noisy. You still have some signal, because you see the gene expression move. It's not only something that is localized around 1, 0, or random value. You have some real expression, but it's really random. However, when you have something that is localized in this part of the space, if you display the X and Y, so again, it's a gene expression, depending on the value of Z, that is the condition variable, you can see it can go from something that is, again, pretty random display to something that is really highly correlated. So the value, depending on the dependency between X and Y, when you have the X and an age composed of X and Y, if you change the value of Z, the behavior between the X and Y nodes will change. For instance, you have low express, if Z is low express, you have no signal between X and Y, something pretty noisy and random. And if you increase the expression of Z, you'll see a correlated behavior between X and Y. So it's something that you want to expect. And apparently, our measure, the sigma, we can have similar result with T and with Tn, even if with Tn the value and the composition of this dot is not exactly the same. For example, if you have if it's for a triplet, you have a strong triadic interaction detected according to sigma. It will be also highly detected for Tn, but the top one can be different. So I just give you a little bit more details about how to detect this triadic interaction. For instance, if you remember, the sigma measure is based on the standard deviation of the conditional information. So if you have 5 states for your Z, Z equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this value is associated to the quantile. So you have your gene expression of the Z. You divide here in 5 quantiles, but you can change this in the number of quantiles, and you compute the mutual information based on this support of your gene expression. And the sigma is the standard deviation. The t is the absolute value between the mean. Also, the mean should be something is there, and the max, like the difference between the mean and the vector. So it would be, if you have something there, it would be the difference between the mean and this point. And the Tn is absolute difference between 2 consecutive. So the difference between this one, this one, this one, and this one, this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So again, it would be this one. So in this case, the T and Tn give you the same value, but sigma will be different, and it will be the standard deviation of the conditional mutual information. So this fit is obtained based on a regression tree. So you construct a decision tree, and the value of this tree will give you the fit, the function that fit this point. That's something that it could be, if you know the literature about how to detect higher order patterns in gene expression, there are papers that is pretty well known that develop an algorithm named Mindy, and they detect some three-way. So the three-way can be a lot of different things. It can be a triangle, it can be a triadic interaction, it can be a coupling of pairwise in a way. And so because this paper is pretty old, it's 40 years old now, and they don't really determine the difference between a triangle and a triadic interaction. And in this paper, they make the assumption that the regulation have to be a monotonic function. So that means you have something lowly expressed and highly expressed. And the conditional mutual function will grow or decrease. In practice, it's an assumption that can be reasonable, but you have a lot of different points that don't obey to this monotonic behavior. For instance, I give you an example. So this one is definitely not a monotonic function, but yeah, our method can detect this one as a triadic interaction, pretty accurate. And you see when you display the data, so the X and Y expression, depending on the Z value, you can see a rapid changing of behavior. So that makes sense to detect this one as a triadic modulation, as a triadic interaction. That doesn't mean that this one with real triadic interaction, but that just means, according to the data, this one seems to be interesting to study, and that makes sense just according to the distribution that this one have an interesting behavior that can be associated to a triadic interaction regulation. So we finished the paper. So the paper will be accessible in the archive in 2 and 3 weeks. We have to polish some details to make everything understandable. And the package that will be associated, his name is Traction, will be accessible at the same time. So it's coming very soon. So now I will give you some visualization of the network, because now you can process the same analysis that I show you on all or support of the network of the PPI with a gene expression, and you can detect as the most accurate triadic interaction, and you can display it. So in blue, it's the PPI, so the structural network. So it's a thing that is known in this study, and you predict, or you mind, the triadic interaction based on the gene expression. And you see here the black diamonds represent the edges that was regulated by a node of the structural network. And if it's green, that means the correlation is positive. So it's a positive regulator. And if it's red, it's a negative regulator. So you see when you display the top triadic interaction that is predicted by our model for the acute myeloid leukemia, we refine the OX family, MS1, PBX3. And for the people that are familiar with acute myeloid leukemia, or for example, I have some colleagues that are very familiar with this disease. This subnetwork makes a lot of sense. And in the literature, some gene, especially MS1, PBX3, the OX family, especially OX9, are known to have some complex behavior of regulation. So some papers are not clear that which of this node is a regulatory node. It's OX9, MS1, or PBX3. But it's apparently this gene work all together, not only by pairwise, but you have a complex patterning to make some action. And on the right, again, I displayed for a specific age. Here it's OXB5 and OXB6. The ranking of all the nodes of the network. So of course, obviously, it's not only the network is not only this node. You have 640 different nodes, and you see, well, here it's you have to consider that this one is a log scale. You have some linear. So if your log is decrease more or less exponentially, the ranking. So the top one for all the three measures, sigma, t, and tn, the theta score, so the accuracy score is the same. So the top node is, for these ages is MES1. The second top regulator of this age is ETS2 for both sigma and t, and for tn is THI, that you can refine it as 4 top nodes and the 5 top nodes for the 2 other one. So you see the composition of the top regulator change, but it seems to go in the same direction. For sigma and t is very similar, but for tn it's pretty complementary because you can predict force idle one that is not toply predicted by the other one. But if something is high ranked, it will be also high ranked in the other one. So the message is all these three measures are pretty consistent, give some consistent results. The results are pretty consistent when you observe this according to the literature. And according to the null model that you developed, it seems to be non-accompanying of pairwise, because the null model, you are very careful to check based on the null model and on the toy model that you develop on the ideal case, to distinguish triadic interaction, so one node that regulates an age, with a coupling of pairwise. That means when you have 3 nodes and you have one node, you have one age or one relation between x and y and z, and then an x. So you make a lot of you pay a lot of attention to check that, and it's not a coupling of pairwise. It's a real triadic interaction, and of course you can discuss on the accuracy of the score, because the dataset is noisy and so on. But according to the toy model and to the accuracy of the value compared to a null model that is taken into account a coupling of pairwise, it seems to be really triadic interaction. And when you display the dataset, the data of x and y, depending on the value of z, you see some clear patterning and dependency on z. So this slide just a comparison with the MINDY, the former method that known to be before it was the state-of-the-art method, and it was pretty similar to the sigma measure, because our sigma it's based on when you have the gene expression of z, you divide it in m quantile, and you compute the standard deviation. In the MINDY measure, you take only the 35% of the lowest expressed gene and the 35 highest expressed gene, and just compute the mutual information for these both parts of the gene expression, and they compute the absolute difference between both. The absolute difference of the mutual the absolute difference between both, and they obtain a score. So it's why they have to make the assumption that this function is monotonic, because if it's not monotonic, you have something that increase and decrease and increase, the absolute difference will be equal to 0. That's why during a lot of trading are missed based on this method, because it's based on this assumption. And if you remove this assumption, you can predict a broader behavior, broader triplets and so on. And it could be also accurate for a different kind of systems. And not only gene expression, it could be also accurate for climate changing. You have some collaboration with Jürgen Hurst that work with climate changing, and you have some time series for different phenomena, especially La Nina and Nino movement and so on. And so yeah, so it's pretty broad, and you can, even if you study gene expression, it seems to highlight some new triadic interactions, some new triplets that seem to be relevant. Now I will finish with the connection with the structure Missingness. if you listen correctly before, you see you define everything on continuous variable, but for structure missingness, the data you have some binary data set because it will be an indicator matrix, so you have the features X, Y, and Z. And for each features, you have a vector of 0 and 1. It will be equal to 0 to 1 if the information is missing, and equal to 0 if the information is not missing. So using a continuous formalism doesn't make sense for this case. And you develop with Nestra a reverse Ising model. So in an Ising model, you have the parameters and you determine the distribution according to a given parameters. And you reverse Ising model, you have your distribution and you want to infer the parameters of the Ising model. So if you have a 2D Ising model, you have hx, hy, and gxy. This one would be the magnetism moment between x and y. So it will be set magnetism of x, magnetism of y. It could be seen just as a non-physics model, but it comes from physics. And you can show for triadic interaction that the strength of the triadic interaction is associated to this parameter, the jxy. So you have this different distribution, you compute according to a categorical value. So here the constant type, the different parameter of this Ising model, and you compute for different constant type. So it's the categorical value, the barycenter, the standard deviation, and the max distance of all the reverse Ising models. And you displayed it on you displayed these parameters in your space, and after, for example, the standard deviation could be similar to the sigma that you defined before for continuous variable. And you see for these triplets, this is metastatic, T-stage, and constant type, that you detect some triadic interaction for this model. And if you make some reshuffling of this model, just by shuffling all the Z features, so you're shuffling all the constant type. So for instance, if you're A here, it can become a B and so on. So all the subset of A and B have a different composition. And you display the value of the reverse Ising model for all the different constant type in the same space. So you see the same range of X and Y, X, HX, XY, and GXY. It's really aggregated, so you can see any behavior, especially when you consider the JXY that is associated to the strength of the triadic interaction. So it seems to be, you have nothing, it's really aggregating. And when you check that, everything seems to be pretty randomly displayed. And here, when you check this, the visualization, the HX is associated to the is metastatic. So if you have a different distribution according to different constant type for the metastasis, you can see this happen in this axis. Same for the T stage here, and on this Z axis associated to a GXY, again, it's the strength of the triadic interaction. So this model, this triadic reverse Ising model seems to be a good model for detecting triadic interaction in structure missingness, and by extension for any kind of discrete systems. So to conclude, and for the take-home message, triadic interaction can happen in a very different kind of systems: ecological systems, gene expression, structure missingness. With my colleague, you developed some different measures to identify the strengths and also the sign of the triadic interaction, and both for continuous case with continuous data set, and also for discrete data set. So thank you. And if you have some, if you have some questions associated to structure missingness, I have some supplementary figures there, and I can give you some details in some cases for maybe can be more relevant for the Roche people. So thank you. I finished.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Yeah, I think you can stop sharing now. So if you have any questions for Anthony, feel free to pop them in the Q&A box, which you can find in the bottom bar in Zoom, or you're welcome to raise your hand. Tanya, take it away.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I found it very innovative. I'm based at Newcastle University, and I speak from the perspective actually from someone in law. And the question which I have is actually about the data which you used and how it's related to real people. Because, for example, based on my study of biology, I realized that there is a complex process being involved in how genes communicate and different, for example, molecules being involved. But I just wonder whether you are just using a theoretical knowledge, for example, that exists in biology, or whether you are linking this to actual people, and if so, how you're doing it. And also I'm wondering how you are taking into account environmental factors. So, for example, we know that stress is connected to cancer, right? And, you know, for example, pollution can affect people's health. So my question really is how you are connecting this modeling to the situation of individuals, but also how you incorporate these more complex interactions between people and the environment in your modeling. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. If you consider this result, it's really it will be the first paper dedicated to the detection of triadic interaction. So it's more driven by the theoretical part. So for the point of view of the application, I think the result is encouraging. So you see, we detect some, for example, in the case of acute myeloid leukemia, the results make sense. So it's really encouraging. But if you want to have more significant output for people, and especially for biological knowledge, I think you can dig deeper inside. And you plan to have another paper, more focus on gene expression, gene regulatory network, and so on. And to study, especially when you, because I think you should be familiar with that. The condition to information is also based to define some causal graph, so to determine some colliders when you have some causality and so on. So one of the possibilities is to study the causality in this network and to infer gene regulatory network based on the triadic interaction, not only based on pairwise. So to see if the triadic interaction can provide more information for the inference of gene regulatory network. So this one just for the on the point of view of the biological knowledge, and to have something that is accurate according to the state-of-the-art method and to the current question in the biological study, because in this paper is more a proof of concept that this model is not only a theoretical model. You have some strong theoretical result, but also it seems to be encouraging in a practical aspect. And for the second question about individual prediction, I didn't test that, but I think you can test this kind of model on a single RNA-seq, and you can test if you have some individual signal and so on. So, to be honest, I didn't test that for the moment, but it could be something that will be interesting. To determine if a triadic interaction it seems to be really associated to one individual or something that is common to a lot of individuals, and it can be to be something that is more accurate on the biological point of view, because it's something that is consistent to several cancer type cells and so on. So I think it could be interesting to study that. But for the moment, it's really preliminary results. And the message of this paper would be triadic interaction happen in a lot of different systems. It seems to make sense for the gene regulatory network, for the gene regulation, and also for structure missingness. And my colleagues, Jürgen Koss, work on the climate changes, and it seems to make also sense in this context. So I hope I replied to your question.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks, Anthony. And we've got a couple more in the Q&A box, so I will take you through those. So the first is, can your approaches have sensitivity to functional form of the interactions, not only the strength?
What do you mean by the sensitive to the functional form? Because I talk about a little bit about the monotonic function. You have some the condition function is a monotonic function. Our model can detect if it's a non-monotonic function, and you can detect both. So our measure is not so sensitive if you have monotonic and monotonic. They consider both. If you want to detect a triadic interaction, it makes no sense to base the prediction on an assumption like it's a monotonic function, because sometimes the biological system can be very noisy and sometimes can have non-monotonic function and it can be still relevant. So in this case, you can, because you study the fluctuation based on the standard deviation of the conditional information, it don't really depend on some assumption like monotonicity. So I'm not sure I reply to your question, because I'm not sure to understand the sensitivity of the functional form.
Feel free to unmute if you want, or you can also put a follow-up question in the Q&A and I can ask that if that's better.
Sorry, this if I can go, yeah, I think you certainly partly answered my question. I mean, information theoretic measures are obviously sensitive to the strength. By functional form, I meant, even if it's monotonic, what is there a way to rig the approaches to make it sensitive, going beyond information theory, to the actual functional form of the interaction? Meaning, like, is it x squared or exponential, or distinguish between different monotonic functions? And potentially the answer is that it can't. So yeah.
Yeah, you can do that, but for gene expression, I think you can't, because it's too noisy. For example, if you decrease the step, for the number of quantile, you decrease it and you have more data points. It could be just too noisy, and it makes no sense to have a really thin step, because gene expression in this case, the dataset that I use are too noisy. But if you have a very nice defined dataset, maybe easier dataset than gene expression, yes, you can make that. And especially when you make some regression tree, you can show that the regression tree is pretty robust to the number of quantities to choose to binding your conditional information. So because, for example, if your regression tree is something like that, if you change, so it's a conditional information, so you have different time points for each support of your Z function, of your Z expression. And if you reduce the binding, you have more points, and the regression tree seems to have the same shape. So if you have a more complex regression tree, because this one is composed of 2 branches and 3 leaves, because you apply that on a gene expression that is pretty simple. You have to be simple because the data is noisy, and if you have something very complex with a lot of branches and a very complex function, that makes no sense, because it's too noisy. At the end, you just fit some noise. So it's why. But yes, but you don't apply that in the case of gene expression.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you.
And your second question is, have you thought of extending to higher-order periodic interaction? Yes, you think about that, but it's very preliminary. So for the moment, you cannot really talk about that, because we don't really converge to something really accurate and interesting. But yeah, you consider that.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Good luck.
Thanks for clarifying as well. So the next question in the chat is, could you compare the utility of triadic interactions and TDA, the discovery of higher order interactions in the network data?
I don't really compare a triadic interaction with TDA, but yeah, because you don't really, when you have some TDA, you want to study if I want to study the geometry of my network and so on, if I define some simpler complexes, yes, it could be useful. But here the idea is to make some mining, not to have an extensive approach, because you cannot compute all the sigma for every triplets. Because if you have 640 nodes, you can imagine the number of triplets of that. It's for the number of edges is 2 among 640, and you multiply that by the number of nodes that rest. So it's a 640 minus 2, and it's really a lot for a really small networks. So if you have something extensive, this method can be difficult to compute. So it's why it's mining, not to extract all the method. And again, it's a proof of concept, or maybe it can be connected to the question of the first person about if you can use that in a broad biological context. The answer is yes, but I think you have to tune some things, and especially on the significancy, because if you have, there's a big literature on, for example, in the Mindy paper, the paper that was released 15 years ago, they also make some assumption based on the independency of your expression, especially when you have some skewed distribution and so on. So in the following paper, we will study that to have something more extensive on the biological context with a more syndicated result, with something more robust. And yeah, maybe you can consider to compare with TDA into something more extensive. But in this case, in only some specific triplet and test these triplets and compare it to the literature and so on. So I hope I replied to your question, Sanjay.
Thanks, Anthony. We've just got another question. Oh, perfect. I'm glad that was helpful. We've got a couple of minutes left, so do feel free to pop any last minute questions into the chat or raise your Zoom hand. I will just give it a minute or so.
So maybe it's no question. I can add something for the people that ask about higher order and so on. For the next paper, you also study some the synergy and the redundancy on the network, and especially the generalization of the conditional information. There are some papers that study the O information, that the generalization for multivariate variables. And you can have some flavor of synergy and redundancy of this behavior. So you can study the synergy and the redundancy of triadic interaction and compare that to what you obtain when you have only pairwise and so on. So it's something to plan and to go deeper on the higher order perspective and so on. So yeah, you're still thinking about that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anthony. I don't see any more questions. In that case, I will draw us to a close. Thank you so much for your fantastic talk.